Hi, class. What I wanted to do today is do a brief discussion on rhetoric, especially as we have a couple of assignments coming up where I think it'll just be important to make sure that you understand those concepts that are connected with rhetoric. Obviously, great materials in our mini textbook, those 3 chapters that you're reading, the 2 that you read this week and the one you'll read coming up. A couple things I'll just say is that on Thursday and then on Friday, you are crafting an analytic response to Shore and Corbett. Now you can keep these responses informal, but I'd like to see that you're starting to consider them from a rhetorical perspective. Also, you are going to write an essay on either Shore or Corbett. It's going to be a rhetorical analysis, and basically the analytic response that you do for each of those is whichever one you choose, that'll be the launching pad for your project. So brief discussion on rhetoric. I find students have varying degrees of understanding of it. Some students have a really good mastery of it. Some students haven't been quite as exposed to it. So we're just going to kind of go through and talk about that. So what is rhetoric really? We place a strong emphasis on it in this and other writing courses. You'll probably see this at NAU because it does play a significant role in both your skills as a writer and skills as a reader. I think any strong writer is going to have a good rhetorical sense of anything they do. So when they create a written work, they're going to think about the rhetorical aspects of that and think about that situation. It allows us to pull back the curtain on either a work we are creating or a text we are analyzing to understand how it was created and how the situation influenced it. Ultimately, all writing is persuasive. So whether we're trying to persuade an audience that our ideas, research, or analysis is sound and reasonable, rhetoric is what kind of allows us to do that, or understanding, thinking, comprehending rhetoric. I've seen a lot of different models for the rhetorical situation. My preference is the 5-sided star. We have the author at the top who creates the rhetoric. We have the exigence, which is the thing that prompts the rhetoric. So what's the impetus or the catalyst, the thing that launches the author to create it. So for an example, if you're writing an analytic response, the exigence is the assignment. The exigence is you need to do it to get a grade on it. So it's the forces that kind of push a piece of rhetoric into being or push the author into creating it. Audience is pretty obvious, but sometimes we break it down into unintended audiences, intended audiences, but an author might be thinking of who is going to read this rhetoric or view this rhetoric, and then how can they adapt to that. We also have genre and constraints, and you see constraints excuse me, brought up in our chapters. So really that's about like what form is the rhetoric taking? Is it a film? Is it a billboard? Is it a YouTube video or a tweet? And when we study rhetoric in the media, we're really concerned about genre because as you can see when you're reading through our textbook, that the way you look at different genres is different. But then we also have constraints. So what are the limitations that genre creates for the author, whether it's how long something can be or how short something has to be or what it can or can't do. Then finally we have purpose. So what's the ultimate goal that the author has for this piece of rhetoric? What do they want the audience to think, feel, do? How do they want them to act? What's really kind of the goal of the rhetoric? And that's our main situation. Obviously appeals, you've probably heard of ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is credibility, so it's not ethics. And what that means is like, how does the author establish the credibility, or how does the author convince the reader or the audience of their credibility? Pathos is emotion. So, when we think about that, we think about what emotional appeals are used to appeal to the author, or appeal to the author to appeal to the audience. And then logos is logic, reasoning, appealing to the head, rationale. And so all of the things that happen with appeals is occurring between that author and that audience. Finally, we do add kairos. and kairos is also known as right timing, or how an author considers the moment and it adjusts their message based on what's going on. We see that a lot now during the pandemic. Obviously, some things we might say or do or express now might be different than we did 6 months ago. So that kind of can play a role. So that's my 5-minute spiel on rhetoric. If you have any questions, always reach out to me, and I don't mind too if you use our Say Anything, Ask Anything board. If you just would rather put a question out anonymously, totally great, or you can shoot me an email. But hopefully that helps with you getting some thinking around this.